Okay, so the first thing that we're going to take a look at here is we're going to add some info to our homepage. Now, remember that the user object, which we got inside our app component, right? This user object that we have as a state and that we're then getting from Firebase once the user actually logs in. This user object contains a lot of information about the user from Firebase. So in other words, it will contain things like the user's email address. It will contain whether or not they verified their email. It'll contain their Firebase user ID. Lots of useful stuff. So let's actually display that on our homepage just so that we can get an idea of what kind of information it contains and what it can be good for. So the way that this is going to work is basically we're going to make our homepage take that user as a prop. Okay, so we'll say homepage user, and we're just going to display that down here underneath our home heading and above our logout button for now. But first, let's actually log this thing out to the console just to see what our user looks like. And, this will basically allow us to see all of the properties and talk about those a little bit. So we've added that prop, we're logging it out. We just need to pass that through from our app component now. We're just going to say homepage, and user is going to be user for that. And now let's just run our application by saying npm run start. And sure enough, we see that our user is logged out to the console here. So let's open this and take a look at it a little bit. Let me just zoom in here a bit. There we go. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Okay. All right. So first of all, we see this access token thing. This is something you don't want to share with people, right? This is a secret thing that you don't want anyone besides the user to get a hold of. Now, normally this is not a huge problem. Firebase generally takes care of keeping all that stuff secret and secure, but just make sure that you don't, just make sure that in your React code, you're not displaying this anywhere where, someone could look over the user's shoulder, or I don't know what kind of situations you could run into with that, but be careful with it is the point here. So anyway, okay, so next up, we have auth, we have display name, which is null in this case. We have email. This is the user's email address, right? That's the email address that the account was created with. We have email verified, which tells us whether or not that email address has been verified by Firebase. Firebase auth actually has its own email verification flow that we can use, if we find that we want to add that to our application. Let's see, it's got other information besides that, such as phone number, photo URL. A lot of those things come in when you start using OAuth or that kind of thing. Besides that, really the only other thing that we care about right now is going to be this UID thing. This is the Firebase user ID that Firebase automatically generates when we create that user profile either in the Firebase console or if we create a new user in our React app, which we'll see how to do shortly. So that's pretty much all of the data that Firebase provides us with. And there are some other things we didn't cover here that aren't really important for our purposes right now. But why don't we just take a look at how to actually display that data? All right, we're just going to display some of the key pieces of that data on the homepage, such as the user's email, the user's ID, etc. So what this is going to look like is in our homepage, when we get our user, we're basically going to add a heading underneath H1 that says H3. We'll say you are logged in as user.email. Okay, so that'll tell the user what email address they're logged in with. Underneath that, what we're going to do is say paragraph. And one of the pieces of data that we actually have access to, which I don't think I showed you, here, let me just go back and open this up again. We see that we have our email up here too, by the way, which is good. One of the things that I didn't show you, if we open this up, is that if we go into metadata, this actually has some pretty useful information, right? These are things that sometimes, under certain circumstances, you might actually want to display to the user, right? Such as the last time that they logged in. I've noticed this a lot on bank websites, right? It'll tell you when you last logged in. So in case someone got a hold of your account and has, done something on it, you can, that can serve as an alert to you, right? That you logged in at a time when you don't remember logging in. So anyway, this last sign-in time, in this case, right? This is the last time I actually clicked log in with the email and password for this account. But just for demonstration purposes, let's actually display this last sign-in time up here in our application. So what we're going to do is go back here. We'll say you logged in at user.metadata.last sign in time. Okay, that's the nicely formatted one that we saw back here. Okay, you can also do last login at, which is an actual timestamp, but you know. Oh, and besides this, by the way, this also has when the account was actually created, which is kind of an interesting thing. Now, these are very close in my case because I just created the account and then logged in with it. But in general, I'd imagine those will be pretty far apart. So besides the login time, besides the user email, the last thing we're going to display is the user's ID. Now, this is not something that users will normally care about, but because of some of the things that we're going to be taking a look at later, right, we're going to see how to actually incorporate Firebase auth in a server and a database, we're going to want to use this ID. So just to make it easier for ourselves, let's say something like your user ID is user.uid. Okay, so if we go back and take a look at our application now, we'll see that it's displaying all of the required data, right? It says you are logged in as sean@gmail.com. You're logged in, you logged in at Tuesday, blah, blah, blah. Your user ID is blah, 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 blah. That big, long user ID thing, okay? And of course, if we log out, it'll say successfully logged out and take us to the login page. So just to see that that information all works with different users, let's actually go into the Firebase auth console again and create a few more users. I'm going to create a new user here, which I'll call sean2@gmail.com. Password for that one's going to be the same as before, right? Generally, when I'm testing, I like to create all of my users with the same easy to type password, since that just makes it, it makes it a lot easier to remember. There are a few things that are more humiliating than forgetting a test password for a test account, especially when it's something simple like that. So let's click on Add User now. That'll create Sean2. We'll click Add User. We'll add Sean3 as well at gmail.com. Same password. And click Add User. Okay, so now that we've created these other accounts, let's actually log in with those and see that they display some different information. So what we're going to do, let's log in as Sean2 here at, what did I say, gmail.com? Yeah, gmail.com. Gmail.com and ABC123. Log in. Sure enough, we'll see successfully logged in. Click OK. And that'll display some slightly different information, right? It'll say Sean2@gmail.com. The user ID here is going to be completely different. Okay. And let's do the same thing with Sean3. Just for demonstration purposes, Sean3@gmail.com, ABC123, click login, and sure enough, we see all of the pieces of information for that. Cool, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into some of the user information that Firebase auth provides for us. Now, obviously, there are going to be different circumstances and different information available depending on how the user logs in. I believe I mentioned earlier that if the user has logged in with OAuth, right, if they've logged in with their Google account, let's say, chances are that you're going to have a lot more information, right? You might even have something like a profile picture that that Gmail has provided for you. So, but that's all stuff that we'll see later on. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.